Thank you, Aditya. Now, may I request Aarti to give us your comments?
We're not guys, we're ladies.
Thank you, ORF, and thank you, Dulat Sahab, for providing me this opportunity to speak and sit next to the men who decided the history of not just Kashmir, but the entire Indian subcontinent. So it's quite humbling to be sitting next to you and speaking on your book. The foremost thing that I felt after reading the book was that Mr. Dulat comes across as a very compassionate person. He comes across as someone who has a lot of empathy, who is sensitive, who is seeking solutions. And that's very unlike the profession he has been in, and very unlike of the role he was supposed to play. But in a way, he also represents the very philosophical foundation of India. He represents India the way it was conceived. He represents the India the way it's been enshrined in the Constitution. So full marks to him for displaying all that India really is. And of course, General Durrani also came across as someone who can really represent Pakistan, because through the book, he's far more cautious, he's far more uptight, he's also evasive, unlike Mr. Dulat, who is upfront, who has a political view and has sort of learned from the experience in the field. Having said that, I'm sorry and I'm afraid it would be probably politically incorrect to say that I actually found the book quite superficial. But that's perhaps what the critics are saying, because the book, Spy Chronicles, Raw and ISI, doesn't really provide you insights that one was expecting from the book. It gives you an overview of what the two gentlemen did in the subcontinent in the last, say, 30 years. Also, two more insights which I could sort of draw from the book. Either the entire book is a subterfuge under some kind of spy simulation, which most of us cannot comprehend. We do not understand the purpose of the book. We don't understand what it's really doing to the subcontinent, what it's doing to the narratives of the subcontinent, what it's doing to the psychology of two hostile nations. So either it's some master spy game being played out through this book or his previous book, or he truly believes in whatever he has said in the book. And if, I'm a journalist and I tend to take the written word on its face value. So I will take everything that's been written in the book on face value and say that if I have to describe it in one sentence, I would say that the book is, in a way, apologia for the policies of Pakistan in the last 30 years, at least from the RAW point of view. And that is quite scary, because it also goes to show that there's some fundamental lack of historical understanding, lack of understanding about the complexities of Kashmir problem that remains the core issue between India and Pakistan. And also that if this is what our bureaucracy thinks, if this is what our deep state really thinks and formulates policies on, then India doesn't really have much hope against a state that believes in terrorism and that believes in breaking of India, disintegration of India. The problem with what Mr. Dulat, with all his empathy and compassion for people, is that there's a certain trivialization of Pakistani policies. There's a clear justification of what Pakistan has been doing for the last 30 years. At one point, Mr. Dulat says, and then we complain about terrorism. So terrorism, in his vocabulary, is a complaint. It's not something tangible. It's not something real that people have experienced in Kashmir or the rest of the country. And that's really, really scary. At other points where I really felt that it's a political project at one level. It has a political message. It has a political objective. It does not have the analysis of an executive, which is the fundamental role of an agency like RAW. There's absence of analysis in this book. At one point, Mr. Dulat, not actually one point, at several points through the book, Mr. Dulat keeps repeating what India's approach should be towards Kashmir and towards Kashmiris. And this particular sentence sort of stood out for me. He says, the crucial thing is that don't rub the Kashmiri nose in the ground any further. Don't give him a sense of defeat. That is when the Kashmiri starts to pelt stones. He's paraphrased a similar sentiment throughout the book. And my question to him, and probably to everyone here is this Kashmiri nose, the nose of Hurriyat, the separatists, or the nose of those 15,000 Kashmiri Muslims who were killed by Pakistan-sponsored terrorists? Why is there a conflation between the ordinary Kashmiri Muslim and the Hurriyat throughout the book? There's a serious failure in that sense, because it seems the only Kashmiri Mr. Dulat knows is the Kashmiri separatists. He doesn't know any Kashmiri Indians. He doesn't know any Kashmiri Muslim who will stand by India's constitution in Kashmir. He doesn't know anyone who would talk in the interest of the syncretic Kashmir that I was raised in. It seems the only Kashmiri he knows is the one who is fed by Pakistan, who is fed by Mr. Durrani. And that is a real tragedy. So this conflation is, again, a huge problem. And when you conflate the two major entities in Kashmir, you end up drawing wrong policies. You end up formulating policies which are going to incentivize crime, which are going to incentivize the terror in Kashmir, which it has in the last 30 years. If I'm not wrong, Mr. Dulat was there from 88 to 1990. And if you go by all the books that have been written for that particular period, there was an absolute intelligence failure on India's part about what was really happening in Kashmir. I have great regard for Mr. Dulat. I actually admired the book that he wrote earlier. But I think, there's a fundamental problem with Indian intelligence agencies. The deep state has not resolved Kashmir in the last 30 years. It has not resolved India-Pakistan problem in the last 30 years. What it has really done is that it has perpetuated the problem, and it's going to perpetuate the problem not just for Kashmir, but for the rest of India for another 50 years. the kind of politics that we are seeing. Okay, I'm just going to wrap it up here. Last one point. The book is a missed opportunity. Thank you.
Can I
Yes,
make
please.
one final comment? And, this is for. I think the army likes politics more. Yes. I agree with you, sir. No, just a comment on, the young lady here, Aarti said a lot of things. But just on one thing, that, that I am only friendly with I don't know Kashmiris, and I'm only friendly with the separatists. I only talk about the separatists. I thought I was always accused of being a friend of Dr. Farooq Abdullah. And presumably you regard him also as anti-national. So my point is that...
That is unfair. With due respect, please do not make any presumptuous comments about me.
Do you ever go to Kashmir? Have you ever been to Kashmir?
Sir, I was born and brought up in
I
Kashmir.
know you were born, but have you visited Kashmir?
Yes, sir.
When do you visit?
I
How often do you visit?
I reported in J&K from 1999 to 2006, and then again from 2010 onwards.
Okay.
Thank you.
But you haven't got over your deep prejudices.
That's again a very presumptuous judgment.
Okay.
We may not agree, but she has the right.
No, you
So she has
are right. It must be very unfair. I think a lot of what you said was very unfair.
I was talking about the book.
I have a quick